and was founded by Dr. Andrew Buzari at the T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Dr. Buzari used his own time and his own funds to create HPHR.org and recruited the founding editorial board. Since that time, the journal has been published online at least 3 times per year, and we're currently known as HPHR. However, we are very excited to announce that the journal will be undergoing a name change to better align with the Boston Congress of Public Health, whom we are now published by. Going forward, we will permanently be known as BCPH-R, which stands for the Boston Congress Public Health Review, and will share the same mission and vision. At the journal, we publish scholarly articles, which are defined by some specific characteristics, as is illustrated on the slide. Just to highlight a few, scholarly articles usually have a specific subject focus. They're written for researchers, professors, and students in the associated field primarily. They often include specialized terms or perhaps jargon of the discipline. They possess a very formal outline and structure, and are often peer-reviewed, which you will all be engaging in here at the journal. Academic publishing also includes a number of roles, like managing editor, a deputy editor, associate editor, among others, and each has their specific scope of responsibilities. However, before we delve into each role and its specific responsibility in more detail, I thought we could walk through our editorial process first. So the first step is to have an article be submitted through the Scholastica platform. Step 2 involves the article being reviewed by our managing editor. The managing editor would be responsible for ensuring that the manuscript aligns with our submission guidelines and protocols. And at this step, non-compliant articles have the ability to be desk rejected if they do not meet our criteria. Step 3 involves an article being either chosen by or assigned to an associate editor. The role of the associate editor is to read the article and then decide to send it out to at least 2 appropriate subject matter experts for review. At this stage, the associate editor can also serve as a reviewer for the articles that have been assigned to them. Moving to step 4, this is when the reviews have been returned. At this stage, most reviewers agree to either accept or reject or even request a revise and resubmission of a manuscript. As an associate editor, it is your role to ensure that you receive the reviews and address disagreement. In this case, in the case of disagreement, for instance, if one reviewer recommends an acceptance or the other recommends a rejection, an associate reviewer usually has 2 options. The first option is they can send it to an independent third reviewer to act as a tiebreaker, or they can contact the editors-in-chief to see what they think the status of the manuscript should be. Moving on to step 5, this involves the manuscript being approved by the editor-in-chief and decisions being sent to the author by the associate editor. As an associate editor, you're able to send out 3 decision types. We have the acceptance decision, which is where authors will hopefully indicate their willingness to move forward with the publication. There's an option for revise and resubmit, where authors would be invited to resubmit their manuscript based on the feedback they've received from our reviewers. And the very last option would be a rejection, where the submission process would end at this stage. Step 6, which is the last stage of our editorial process, involves accepted authors approving the publication author, or revise and resubmit authors returning the revised paper to us, hopefully incorporating the comments and feedback that have been given to us by the reviewers. And at this stage, the associate editor would be checking to see if comments have been incorporated. After this, we would either extend a publication or rejection offer. So now that we've seen a very high-level overview of the process, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how we can recognize an excellent review. There are 4 main characteristics that we typically look for in reviews. And in particular, they are timeliness, So was the review completed within the time limit established? Clarity, was it easily interpreted, easily read? Helpfulness, were the comments feasible? Were they realistic, constructive, and relevant? And the last point we look for is thoroughness. Did the review give adequate consideration to all aspects of the paper? And as reviewers, you'll be guided through this process by a reviewer form, which we're going to be going through in more detail a little bit later. As reviewers, your role is critical for a couple of reasons. For instance, it can help us improve the quality of papers that are going to be published. You can determine the importance of findings, ensure previous work is properly acknowledged, and it can help us detect plagiarism and fraud. Additionally, reviewers can also receive credit for their reviews through publons, which records reviewer activity as measurable research outputs. This plays a central role in academic career development. So, what makes a good review? Well, here's an example of a previous review that we've received that's very detailed, it provides constructive feedback, and it does show indication of careful review through the details that have been included. As a reviewer, you would receive a feedback form that looks something like this. As you can see, the top section is for communication between reviewers and editors. We have the overall rating, where reviewers are invited to rate the manuscript on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being rated as poor, 5 being rated as excellent. We also have a section right below where reviewers can suggest that the manuscript be either accepted, rejected, or in need of resubmission. And the last section here, private between the reviewer and the editor, is the comments to the editor section. And this gives reviewers the opportunity to explain why they rated the article as they did, and perhaps highlight any concerns they might have. The next few sections will be anonymously presented to authors for feedback purposes. So as we can see at the top, we ask that reviewers note the importance and timeliness of the topic being submitted, whether they consider the article appropriate for this journal. And in this stage, we would hope that the content of the manuscript would align with our mission and vision, which is available on our website. We ask reviewers to consider the clarity and the coherence of the author's arguments, particularly have they provided illustrative examples that can facilitate understanding? Does the logic flow clearly? Questions of that nature. Moving forward, we also asked them to describe whether or not the article had a balanced presentation of evidence and whether theories used were explained adequately. We asked them to discuss the flow of the article and organization. Perhaps areas could be better connected. Perhaps parts of the manuscript would be better if a subtitle introduced them to allow for reader clarity. And the last section we ask on this particular side of the form is to discuss the piece's implications for health, policy, or practice. Moving forward, we could see that this large section includes the opportunity for a reviewer to provide comments that the author should perhaps consider to strengthen their article. In this case, we do expect that reviewers will give credit where it's due, commenting on things that are well done, and also provide feasible and constructive criticism. If we look at this review in particular, we can see that the beginning section includes something that the reviewer has highlighted. It's something the author has done quite well. Moving forward, we could see the reviewer's suggestions for improvement. And this reviewer has actually gone an extra step and provided some resources they think that the author may benefit from to address some of the comments that have been made in the review. The very last step of the review form involves the rating scale questionnaire, as you can see here. This stage is particularly important for authors because it gives them almost a quick overview of how their manuscript measures up across various categories. We could see that the first category asks reviewers whether they believe that the article adequately engaged scholarly literature, if it's professionally written, if the research methodology was applied appropriately. And in this case, in articles submitted that Do not mention reference methodology. Perhaps it's not applicable in this case. We just ask reviewers to click off the neutral checkbox. We also ask if the literature review was thorough and if, in the reviewer's opinion, the paper makes a significant contribution to scholarship. Before answering the questions on the reviewer form, we do recommend that as reviewers, you try to have a first read through uninterrupted and without writing down comments, to try to give yourself a chance to consider what was the main question that the manuscript brought up and was it addressed? You might want to consider how original the topic was, if the paper was easy to read, if it was well written, if it facilitates understanding, if all conclusions or claims are consistent with evidence and are supported, and lastly, if the paper does include any figures or tables or graphics, do they aid in reader understanding or are they perhaps unnecessary? But in terms of some general top tips and tricks for reviewers, we recommend that you first focus on the science. So you could consider, is the research properly supported with credible sources? Are all the claims justified? And is the article evidence-based? We'd hope that you give constructive and concise criticism. You give credit for something well done. And although we do use double-blind peer review process, we'd hope that you'd raise your competing interest by not reviewing articles you recognize that you have contributed to. We also expect reviewers to respond to invitations and submit their reports in a timely manner so we can help the process move along smoothly and provide well-founded comments for authors that demonstrate objectivity and do provide clear recommendations for improvement, as well as your opinion on whether the manuscript should be accepted, rejected, or revised and resubmitted. Moving on to the next role in the process, the managing editor's role. Managing editors have the responsibility of ensuring that guidelines are enforced. As we mentioned earlier, this could involve a desk rejection at the first stage if manuscripts do not meet the submission criteria. Managing editors are also responsible for copy editing and must be aware of any updates to guidelines. They should have an in-depth understanding of the journal guidelines for each type of article we accept, which could include original research articles, review articles, commentaries, among others. And all guidelines are available on our website. But as a quick overview, guidelines usually include topics such as if figures and tables were formatted correctly, if the manuscript template we provide was used, if references were done in the correct style, they're formatted correctly. This is a big point. If disclosures and conflicts of interest were addressed by the authors, and if font and page numbers were adhered to as well. In terms of associate editors and their role, they are responsible, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, for reading articles, for helping to determine article journal fit. They send articles to at least 2 different reviewers. They can reconcile differential commentary. They can determine the appropriateness of revisions once they're returned to us. And lastly, they do recommend acceptance or rejection for manuscript publication. In terms of the selection or assignment of articles, associate editors can have the chance to select articles based off areas of interest, areas of expertise, or even areas of desired growth. We do expect that associate editors do their best to commit to an article they take on, which would include passing it on to another editor or letting the editor's chief know if you're no longer able to manage a particular article. In terms of determining article journal fit, although the managing editor will do the first sweep to ensure that the manuscript meets guidelines, the associate editor is the second pass for guideline enforcement. We recommend that associate editors try to ensure that the manuscript does not have substantial grammatical errors, that it of course fits our overall mission and vision, and to try to ensure that the manuscript is not offensive, discriminatory, or biased in any way. In terms of sending articles to reviewers, at this stage, it's sent to at least 2 different reviewers, as we mentioned earlier. Associate editors are also responsible within this stage to ensure that they provide an appropriate window of time for reviews to be completed and returned to allow for the process to move along smoothly. When considering reviewer commentary, at this stage, which was stage 4 we discussed earlier, associate editors receive reviews. Now, one of 2 things can happen. Either you can receive a low quality review, which could be identified by commentary being very minimal, perhaps just a few word answers, might involve biased language. And in this case, associate editors can reject this low quality review and send out a new request to another independent reviewer so we are able to provide authors with some feedback. The other type of review we could receive at this stage is an exceptional review, which is what we all hope for, where commentary would be substantial, very constructive, author positive, and evidence-based. Of course, this stage may also bring up differential reviews for manuscripts, which, as we mentioned, must be reconciled by associate editors. They could do this either by inviting a third reviewer to break the tie or consulting with the editors-in-chief as to the status of the manuscript. And the very last step in the associate editor process would be to make a recommendation as to whether the manuscript should be accepted, rejected, or revised and resubmitted. And although ultimately editors-in-chief do have the final word on acceptance or rejection, as associate editors, you can serve as very, very strong advocates for manuscripts, which is particularly important. The last role I want to touch on a little bit is the role of the deputy editor. Deputy editors are responsible to choose areas of interest or passion or even expertise as the topics for new special editions. They have the opportunity to create promotional material and to reach out to potential authors who might be interested on writing on the special edition topic. They're also responsible to curate manuscripts for that special edition and organize them. And the last thing they are responsible for is to create a brief prologue for the special edition once manuscripts have been submitted. In terms of designing the special edition, we put up an example here of our latest calls for submissions, which, as you can see, the editions span across a variety of topics. Most recently, we have promoted the edition on communication, on body image, and the post-COVID workscape. So lots of very diverse and interesting topics that have been done in the past, and we look forward to what you may come up with in the future. The last bit I want to talk about in terms of the deputy editor's role is this creation of promotional material for the special edition. And I really want to reiterate that this is a chance for you to use your creativity to excite and prompt submissions from a range of authors by creating promotions that align with the journal's branding. You can see on the left, there's an example social media ad, which ties into the theme of the email mailer in the middle, as well as the website downloads on the right. And lastly, we want to give a large thank you to you all. All work with the journal is voluntary and unpaid, so we really do appreciate your time and commitment. In terms of next steps, we would ask that those who are interested in moving forward with the journal, please email communications@bcph.org. And Candace, if you wouldn't mind, perhaps you could put that in the chat for folks. After emailing us, you will be assigned 3 trial manuscripts to review before becoming an official reviewer. And this concludes our presentation. So at this point, if anyone does have any questions they would like to ask, please feel free to ask either myself or Circe or Candace. And of course, if any questions do come to mind after the session, please feel free to email us as well, and we'll get back to you shortly.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I do have one question. So
Sure.
with regard to the reviewer roles and editor roles, is it necessary to be a reviewer first before you become an editor, or how does that process work with regard to selection? You did say you were going to send out 3 trial manuscripts for review, and then we would approach those first. So how does that process work?
Yeah, of course. Excellent question. So as you mentioned, we would first like individuals to work on the reviewer side of things, and we'll be sending, if you are interested with continuing with us, 3 trial manuscripts for you to review, try your hand at reviewing, and then you have the chance to become an official reviewer, and eventually you'll have the chance to become an editor as well. I
Yeah,
hope
if
that
I
answered
may
your
add,
question.
And as far as the reviewer role, would we need to request whether or not it is a role as a reviewer for an extended amount of time or more on an ad hoc basis? Would we need to indicate that upfront as well?
Sure, another great question. Candace, would you like to field this one?
yeah, and I wanted to add on to the last part as well. So we've tried different things in the past, and I know some people explicitly applied to be editors, and I know many of you have lots of different experience within the field of public health and or social justice and are already on other journals. We want to ensure that people understand the process for our particular journal, so everyone does have to go through the process of creating reviews. We want to ensure that the reviews are standardized and they meet our criteria. From there, doing 3 reviews or so, and they've been deemed to be of the appropriate quality, then we might ask to have a closer discussion with you. So being asked to come into the editorial board will be by selection. We want to make sure that we have an absolutely good fit. So there may be some people who may be able to come reviewers, but may not necessarily make it to the editorial board itself, because we want to have a very close-knit, strongly working team on the editorial board. In terms of the time period, we usually let people become reviewers once they've already, they've shown us that they are able to write appropriate reviews. We don't put a time limit on it. We do check with people periodically, so we might check every year or so to see if people are still interested. And if we find that people have not accepted reviews or they've declined the ability to take a review a number of times, then we might at that point either reach out to people or decide to take you off the list, and so you would then have to reapply.
Thank you. And then I have one more question. I know I have a lot of questions.
No worries.
So with regard to the review, just kind of getting into some of the specifics of the review. When it comes to reviewing sections like methodology, for example, how, I guess, and maybe it depends on the paper, but how extensive of a statistical analysis are you looking for when it comes to methodology with regard to looking at, whether or not a study is a good, if it's well designed or something like that? Would that just depend on the paper, depend on the field? Could you talk about that a bit?
Sure. Cersei, would you like to field this one?
Yes. So that is where subject matter expertise is truly important when it comes to examining methodology, and having that good grounding in statistical methods is really helpful when it's doing these reviews. Just most of the time, the research articles we get are fairly straightforward in terms of the types of statistical analyses that are being done. If you get an article and you can tell just by looking at it or just by doing a review of it that there's something is amiss and that a deeper statistical analysis or review is required, that you would flag that and we would find someone to do that process. But most of the time we work with a lot of new and emerging authors. This also might be the first time that they're submitting to an academic journal. So getting that type of, feedback is just really important. And so we're not going to get a lot of incredibly complex sort of statistical analysis, if that is helpful. It answers your question.
Yes, that's helpful. And then finally, so the articles that you're going to be sending out to us, are those going to be 3 standard articles that you're sending to everyone, or are the 3 articles going to be specific to our designated areas of expertise that we indicated on the application?
These would probably be 3 standard articles that are not, that do not require someone of very specialized expertise.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Those were great questions. Does anyone else have anything they'd like us to clarify?
Hey, this was a great presentation. So thank you. Thank you for putting it together and walking us through all the different roles and responsibilities and expectations. I'm curious to understand, I saw on the website that there is a call for papers for at this point. So once we have done the 3 sample reviews, is there a timeline when we should expect to receive papers for review, so that we can plan that, okay, this most likely, I'm just making it up, like end of October might be busier than November.
Yeah, Candace, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So it's a little bit difficult for us to actually plan that because papers come in as they come in. It might be easier when we do when we know that we're at the deadline for a significant call for submissions, then we know when things are coming in. So it might just be a matter of if you tell us what your schedule is, and so we can let all of our editors know that this might be a better time for you versus not. Each manuscript, we ask people to review it within 2 weeks. If someone can't review it within that 2 weeks, or maybe an extension of an additional week, then we then revoke that from the reviewer. So yeah, I think sending us your background is the most appropriate for us to move forward. But yeah, it's very hard for us to time that because we can often get 20 or 30 papers within a span of 3 days. So it can be very difficult to time.
And just to add to Candace's point, of course, if you're not able to do a review in the time period, just letting us know in advance is most appreciated so we can facilitate through the process. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
And I just wanted to tag in when it comes to reviews, like when you get one assigned to you, Rick, I can't stress enough, like what Catherine said, if you can't do it within the time frame, letting us know. There's nothing worse than having an article go fallow. And then like it just creates a huge bottleneck for the author as well as for us.
Yes, I completely understand that. I do review papers for other journals as well. So I know how important it is to the turnaround time, and the quality is super, super important. Yes, thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. That wasn't aimed at you, by the way. I was just sort of a general comment. So, but thank you for saying that.
I wanted to get a show of hands. So who is still interested in moving forward through the process? Just so we know, because as we said before, we want to make sure that people then email communications, because I know sometimes people will sign up for things, but then they say, never mind. But we do want to get a sense of how many people want to move forward. So I see one hand, a couple hands. Great.
Excellent.
I see some clapping hands. That's excellent.
See some in the chat as well. That's great.
That's
Good to know. Right. So are there any other questions we could address, perhaps? I see a hand, but I'm not sure if that was related to the question we had just asked. Oh, yes, I see a hand. Go ahead. Perhaps that was related as well to our other question. Well, if there are no other questions at this time, of course, feel free to email us. If something does come up, we'd be happy to respond. But again, just thank you very much, all of you, for taking some time out of your busy weekend to share with us. We really do look forward to hearing back from you all, and wish you the best and take care.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your weekend.
Bye all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.